And we have been discussing everything related to computer science in terms of how you can sort of create a model where using coding, we can sort of implement a solution, right? So we were writing code which solved a problem, we were writing code which created a solution, but eventually all we were doing was that we were writing some code, right? But in our day-to-day life, the thing is, a lot of us also have to deal with some component which we call as data, right? Like literally, just have a look at your everyday tech world. You're always dealing with data, which might be related to file, which might be related to any sort of database, which might be related to any sort of document. You see that we are making use of these documents, these text files, and all that stuff literally everywhere. Now, when we make use of such places, when we make use of such scenarios, it's also important for us that when we are learning computer science, we understand that how can we, while implementing a solution in pseudocode, make use of files. So the class which we're going to be taking today, it's going to relate your whole concept to how you can handle files within your world of pseudocode. Now, this topic is basically given the name of file handling. And when we call it file handling, this basically means that, okay, we are sort of going to be dealing with files. And when I say we will be dealing with files, we are trying to talk about a concept where we might be required to open a specific file. What type of files are we going to usually deal with? So when talking about IGCSE or O-levels computer science, we will be just talking about text files. Okay. A file which might store the marks of students, a file which might be storing the names of students, a file that might be storing any such further detail, but sort of will be storing some detail, right? That is when we talk about such a file, we say that that's going to be the specific type of file which we'll be discussing when we talk about file handling in IGCSE O-level computer science time. So your questions might be related to how they might give you a scenario. They might ask you that, bro, there is this file, you need to open up that file, and when you open that file, you need to basically deal with it somehow by, let's say, modifying it or blah blah blah, right? So you might need to copy data out of it, you might want to do something else, but eventually what we need to learn today is that how can I open a specific file and how can I use those functions to grab the data from it and at the same time paste the data somewhere else. So first and foremost thing is that computer programs will always store data that will be required again in a file. Say, so that's if someone asks you why is file important or file handling, you should be aware that computer programs will always store data, will always store data that will be required again, and will be required again, and hence stored in a file. What do I mean by required again? Like definitely, if I'm writing and hence stored as a file. So like if I'm writing an essay, we see that every time I complete a paragraph, I'm sort of saving it, right? We always save it. So when I save it, what's the purpose of saving it? The main purpose of saving it is to basically ensure that if I temporarily turn off my computer, I know that when I turn off my computer, the data is going to get lost. But because I have stored the data in a file, the good part is that even if my computer is switched off, the data does not get deleted. So if the computer turns off, if the computer turns off and the data is stored in a file, it's not deleted. Stored in a file, it's not deleted. Why is it not deleted? Because your data, rather than being in the RAM, like if I'm currently working on a Microsoft Word essay, like I open a Microsoft Word and I'm writing an essay and I don't save it. So till the point where I'm sort of working on my Microsoft Word or any sort of software, all that execution, we studied this in chapter number 3, is being carried out in a component which we call as RAM that does everything which we are currently executing, right? But now the problem is that if my computer is suddenly being powered off, like maybe there is some crash or maybe the light went off, the problem is the moment computer turns off, everything that's being done in your RAM is being deleted, which means that if I wrote an essay, that is sort of deleted. But then we were like, thanks to the concept of files, or thanks to the concept of von Neumann architecture, we had a stored concept model where what was happening was that we had something like known as memory, right? Which could be a hard disk or SSD or HDD or whatsoever. And based upon that, that hard disk basically allows us that if I want to grab this one part of chunk of that essay which I'm trying to do, I can grab it and I can put it in my memory. Then we studied that all these memory and stuff, they are what? They are non-volatile, which means that if they are stored up here, even if your computer gets turned off, they are not deleted. So if a question comes up as to why you might need a file, or maybe what's the importance of having file, you should be very, very aware that basically files allow us to store data, and they can basically be then used to access the program at a later date, or maybe even accessed by another program. Maybe I write an essay and that essay is being used by some other software, right? So ये बस आपको पता होना चाहिए that computer programs store data, will store data that will be required again and hence stored as a file. And so if a computer turns off and the data is stored in a file, it's not deleted because it's not in the in the RAM, but in the secondary storage. This could come up as a theoretical question, so you should be aware of the basic theory behind why something is being executed. People are like directly jumping into coding and all that stuff, so you should be aware that before coding you are aware of why something is coming like this. Sir, in a past paper a question came, write a code to read it. Sanan bhai, don't take tension. We're going to come to that. Firstly, we are just understanding the theoretical background so that you know the logic as to why we are doing it. And now we will be going towards the coding parts. We will be studying the implementation of how to open a file and all that stuff. Now, coming back to the same logic, at your IGCSE and O-level levels, if we have a specific file, that file, just the way I mentioned, will be most probably a text file. Okay, so it's going to be a text file. A text file can store names, store marks, store values, store any such of, sir, is there a way to move data from RAM to ROM at runtime so it doesn't get deleted? You cannot modify the data within the ROM. We studied this in chapter number 3, that your ROM is something which you cannot modify. Remember, we said that your RAM is something modifiable, but your ROM in most cases is being pre-built by the company who created it. So it's very, very, very rare for you to modify a ROM. So you don't. And otherwise, the second thing is that you will have definitely seen, I'm not sure if you're aware, but usually it goes in a way that if you have seen those mobile ads, it's like 32 GB RAM and 4 GB ROM. So your ROM is always very, very smaller in comparison to RAM because it only stores the boot up instruction. So if you have something in RAM which is occupying, let's say 10 GB, you cannot even place this in this because your 4 GB is sort of already occupied with other important stuff such as related to boot up. So bro, you don't even have space to bring that 32 GB into ROM. And to be very honest, we don't want to bring this into ROM because we sort of have a ROM similar to ROM. We have a brother of it, which we are calling as memory, that has the same exact function to do what? To best directly go and store whatever data you have. So rather than storing the data up here, I take this 10 GB and I put that in my memory. Then later on, if I want to boot up my computer, I boot it up using my ROM. And then if I want to open that file, I'm like, okay, bro, let me grab this 10 GB, bring it back into my RAM, and then I'll do with the work. So there is no apparently reason to take the data from your RAM to the ROM. Perhaps we have a model which already takes the data from the RAM to the memory. So we won't be even indulging in this scenario of taking data from the RAM to ROM because we do have memory, thanks to memory. Memory now, whether we need to go with such a step or not. So now we will be continuing with the fact that, okay, if I have a file, which is going to be of text file, what can I be asked to do with it? So in your exam, you should be aware of 3 things. You should be aware of how to open a file. So like, how do I open a file in pseudocode? Okay. You should be aware of how to read a file, which basically means that if there is a specific file which has the names of 10 students, so I should be able to write a pseudocode that allows me to read all those 10 names. The way we are like reading data from an array, right? How do I do it? I make use of a loop, right? So for count kar dete, ya for I being 1 to 10, and I'm like, okay, you go to the array, whatever the name is, array, and the position is, let's say I, you output that, let's say. So it's sort of giving you the specific name at a specific array position, right? Just like that, if there is a file which is sort of being implemented using text file, and I want to read the names within it, how will I be doing that? And lastly, what if I ask you to create an empty file and then write data into it? So I say that, okay, bro, you implemented this a model, and let's say you calculated the percentages for 50 students, and now I want you to basically write those 50 percentages for the students in a new file, and then you're sort of required to copy the data which you calculated using your program, but now in a text file, so that you can maybe share the text file to be printed, or maybe with your coordinator or whatsoever, right? So these are the only three things you would be required to deal with. Now the thing is, your this file handling is being implemented, was basically introduced in your in your 2023 syllabus. Before that, it was mostly being used in your AS level. Now your AS level is sort of a bit advanced. Your AS level also includes one other function known as append. Now, when studying, you would be again and again asked to make use of append, or maybe there is one other thingy which we will be studying, end of file. These two thingies, or these two topics, are not in your syllabus, not in your syllabus. So if anywhere in the group you're sort of listening to the term that, bro, how do I append it? How do I, what is this EOF, which is end of file? How do I implement that logic? So you should be aware that these two stuff are basically not in your course, so you are not required to know these two things. So if you watch a video or something, just ensure, we can even confirm this from the syllabus later on, but in your syllabus you're only required to know how to open a file, followed by how to read the data from that file, maybe use that data to output something, and also how to write data into it. Now, even till this point, the questions we have done, you will have seen that this topic is very rarely tested, but this does not mean it cannot be tested. There is a great possibility that it is being tested, but the question, this extent to which it might be tested, is limited to these three cases most of the time. So let's start off with the very first part of as to how will I be basically implementing it. Before getting to that, everybody in the chat box, is this clear, the theoretical part and why we are making use of files and blah 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 story? Any questions till now to push? No, because now we will be starting off with the pseudocode of how to open up a file, how to read it, how to write it, and all that stuff. Great, perfect. That's good to know. So now let's move on to, if I want to, let's say, declare some program that basically, for instance, I might want to write something inside it, right? So there are basically two main commands. Okay, there are two main commands. There are basically two main commands, and then बल्कि चार कर देते हैं, 4 main commands. And what are those 4 main commands? The first one is basically known as open file. Okay, so let me give it a different color. It's basically known as open file. From the name itself, you're going to see that this specific function, what it does is that it takes a file and it basically tells the computer that, okay, I have opened a file. So it basically opens a file. Then just like that, remember, whenever you are dealing with computers, it's the same way that if you are writing, let's say you are read-write pe aate hain, bilkul sana. Let's say you're making notes at this point and you are making use of some specific notebook or a register, right? So now you tell me, once you are done with the notes, are you going to leave your notebook just that way on your shelf or on your table or wherever? Or are you going to close the notebook and then put it in a bag, or maybe even at your study table or wherever? You're always going to close it, right? That's how we do it generally, if you have to do it the right way, right? Just like that, whenever we are making use of files in computer, whenever we have to open a file, it's also important that we close the file. So for that reason, the second important command within this topic is that you might be required to close the file at some point. So for that, the syntax is close file. Oh, ulta kar diya. Let me just correct this. Close file. And just like that, you specify the file name up here, and boom, this basically closes the file. So if like a file has been opened up and you want to close the file later on, and let's say I have opened the file and I'm now doing coding on it, and boom, I'm done with it, I'm going to end the program. Before ending it, you are always required to close the file. There is one mark for this statement. So this can be scenario questions karenge, but this is very, very important. Very, very important. And people, including me, when I was preparing for my exams back in, I'm not sure, the 03, we did not have a lot of questions for this because this was newly introduced. But in AS, there was a lot of concepts about close file, right? And I always used to miss this. The marking scheme usually always used to have a mark for this. So you don't want to lose on these easy marks, right? So for that reason, I'm saying that this close file command is very, very important. Just like that, if let's say you want to now read something from the file. Like let's say if I have this as my Word document essay, and let's say in this I have the name as Mars at line number 1, then let's say I might say Aliza is on line number 2, then I might say that okay, we have Ramin on line number 3, I might have Anas on line number 4, I might have Sanan on line number 5, we have Mariam on line number 6. Am I missing anybody? Let me see. अभी जितने आए हैं उनके तो नाम लिख दूं. We have Mariam, Aliza. Okay, we also have Heather. Say Heather and Hassan. Oh, great to see you two here too. So we have Hassan, and we also have, let's say, and let's extend it to this point. So we also have Heather up here. So now if I, let's say, this file has the name of, let's say, names.txt, because it's a text file. You would have definitely seen a text file always has .txt at the end, right? Because if you create a normal text file, it's always going to have this extension. Now, if I want to tell the computer that, bro, open this file, I'm going to be making use of this command, which is basically going to tell the computer that, okay, if I'm going to specify the name of the file up here, so it's going to be names.txt up here or whatever, I'm going to open the file from here. And then once I open it, now I can either read from it or I could write from it. And then afterwards, I would be always required to close the file. Again, I do it like this. But now if I want to read the file, which would basically mean that I grab one name from this, let's say line number 1, we have Mars. So this Mars is going to be read. I might do something with it. Then I would be like, okay, next line. By next line, I would be like, okay, now go to the second line, which is going to read Aliza's name. Then go to the third line, which is going to read Namin line. Then fourth line, which is going to read Anas name, and so on. So how does this work? For that, whenever you want to read something, the command which is being implemented in our course is known as read file. So you always are required to read the file. And what the read file syntax does is that it basically takes a specific line and it basically reads that specific line. But then you might be wondering, sir, okay, you do read file, but where is the data stored? So for that, whenever you read something from the file, you're always going to specify the name of a variable next to it. And that variable will basically be storing the data which you have sort of read. We're going to do the example, but we're going to have this comma up here too. And how this works is that, let's say I'm doing something like read followed by file with a comma, and then I do, let's say, name. Okay, so now if I execute this statement, what this will do is it's going to go to the first line, it's going to grab Mars, and now this Mars name is going to be stored in this variable with the name of name. So now if I do something like output name, you're going to see that it's basically going to be printing the name Mars. That is how sort of I read it. And then we will be making use of a for loop for it to go one by one, just the way we went in an array, traversing through the entire sort of an array. What is traversing? Traversing basically means going one by one after each other. And just like that, if I want to go one by one in a file to read the values or maybe something like that, I'll be still implementing a for loop. And just like that, definitely we saw that if I have to read file, there can also be a possibility that I also write file into it, which might be that, okay, I'm creating a program that wants to that sort of calculates the marks at each of you scored, and now I want you to have an empty file. This is sort of an empty file. But what I want you to do is that this empty file needs to be now filled up with your marks. So maybe like something like a 95 up here, then maybe 82, 87, but you want to keep on filling it on your own. Now, if you want to do it on your own, what's the command you need to use for that? So the command for that is just like read file, but rather than it being read, now you need to write file. Okay, so you need to write file, and then next to write file, just like the way where we were specifying that when you read something from it, you need to store it in this variable next to it. When you want to write something into the file, you also need to specify what you need to write, right? So maybe I want to store the marks. So where will be the marks variable value be stored? It's going to be stored in a variable, right? So whatever the variable which stores the value which you might want to store within that file, you're going to specify that thingy next to the keyword write file alongside a comma. To read a file, do we need to open it and to close it? Abhi uske upar aata hu, bilkul. So now what's the exact format, or maybe how will you be answering a pseudocode question? So remember, whenever a question comes up, the first and foremost thing is that you will be always opening the file. Okay, this is the general model. You will always open a file, then you will go, and then at the middle, you would be either reading or you might be writing, depending upon what's the question. Maybe you will be doing both. And at the very end, when you are done with everything, you will always do close file. So if a question comes up in exam, keep this method or keep this flow diagram in your mind, so that if you sort of want to implement the solution, does it follow this exact model or not? In most cases, sir, I don't understand the read file command. Does it store a value inside of a variable? Bilkul, Hassan Abdullah. Let's say I want to read this file. This is a file which has a lot of names, right? It has all of your names. Now I want to read the name one by one, and maybe I want to output the name. So like, let's say I want to create a program that it opens a file with the name of names.txt, and it basically outputs all the names within that file. So what it does is that when you do read file, it tells the computer, go to this file, go to line number 1, read this file, okay, read this line. It's going to take this line, but it's sort of similar to saying that, okay, where will the name be stored? Right? We need to store it somewhere if I want to output it. It's not going to automatically output it, just like the functions were, where I wanted to store the value somewhere, because read file is just going to return me this name, but where I will be storing it. So to store it, I will be specifying the variable name next to it, so that you like, okay, whatever this name is, go and put it in this specific variable, and then later on I can basically print it from here. I'm going to do multiple examples for this. Usme और समझ आ जाएगी आपको. And how does it know which line to read? We're going to come to that. Good question. उसके लिए हम आगे जब इसके sample question करेंगे ना, तो उससे समझ आ जाएगी. For now, just understand that you basically have these 4 main functions, and whenever you're writing a code, it needs to follow this model: opening file, followed by read, followed by write, followed by close file. So now let's do a sample question which will basically explain upon all these queries you might be having, and how will it be basically dealing with one specific line, how will it understand kab aage jana hai, when to go to the next line, and all that stuff. So like, if I, let's say, want to what do we call it, read a file. So if I want to read a file, how will I be doing that? Firstly, it's really important. Let's say how write a small program, write a program that reads the data in a specific file with the name. Let's say we give the name the name to the file as let's assume names. Okay, so name ko hum karte students.txt. Remember, whenever you have a text file, it's always going to have this extension as .txt. You would have seen, right? Your Windows computer always are ending the files with .exe, right? We generally have documents at .docx. We always have stuff like PowerPoint presentation as PPTX. These are extensions. So whenever we have a text file, it's going to end with .txt. Remember that. Now, how will I be doing this? To do it, let's say formally, firstly, we need to create a variable that sort of stores this text file somewhere. So that rather than writing students.txt, I can sort of just write the name that this is the file you need to open, and you can sort of directly put that name of the file up here within the open file and close file. And it's going to be very much easier for me. Like how, let's say I do it the fully formal way. I'm going to be firstly declaring 2 variables. I'm going to declare one variable which will be storing the name of whatever file I have. So I would be like, okay, one is going to be declare my file, which is basically going to store the name of the file which I need to open, close, and all that stuff. And definitely, if I look up to this, I can clearly see that it is going to be of the data type string, right? So I'd be like, okay, declare my file which needs to be of the data type string. Then definitely, if I want to read the data, I need to create a variable that also clear. This is just to abhi ke liye main वैसे explain करूँ. If a question comes up to declare it, otherwise it's not sort of necessary unless it's asked. So if the question does not ask you, you shouldn't be doing it. But just for your own clarification, you should be aware that this is how you declare it, right? अपने आप को तो fully familiar रखो. बाकी when to do it in exam, when to not do it in exam, that depends upon the examiner's question style. But it shouldn't be like you don't know how to declare a file and then out of nowhere a question comes up that you are required to declare it. So आप shock ना हो जाए कि oh bro, I had never practiced how to declare a file and now I'm cooked. So for that reason, you should be aware of declaring it. बाकी in the past paper session, the whole purpose of doing that will be to explain to you when to do things and when not to do things. So in that, you will understand pretty well that in questions where if you have watched the recording for yesterday's past paper solution practice, I would highly recommend, if you haven't watched it, it's really, 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 really important. Go watch that. You're going to see that, okay, the examiner's marking scheme, unless asked, will never be marking you based upon just writing these declaration statements. files. So that's the point which you're going to be doing once we go to past papers. But for now, you should be aware of everything. Like you shouldn't be missing upon anything. Your concepts need to be super duper crystal clear. And then uske baad, let's see, whatever comes up in exam, we're going to deal it with that way. So we're going to declare a file which is going to store the name of my file. And just like that, I also thought that, okay, we're going to be writing and reading data, but that data is going to be stored in some variable. So we also need to declare something which stores this variable. So let's say we call that something like declare text line, or maybe declare the sentence, maybe declare sentence. This sentence is basically that specific statement which your computer program will read. So like, let's say it reads the name Mars. So if it reads the name Mars, it's going to basically take the name Mars and it's going to basically store it in this variable, which is sentence. And then I can basically deal or maybe output it or maybe whatever I want to do with it. So if I have these two declared, now what I can do it, I need to first of all specify to the computer that, bro, the name of my file is what? It's basically students.txt. So I'm going to basically put this value, I'm going to assign this value into this variable, my file. So how will I be doing this? I would be writing my file, which is my variable, and into this I'm going to assign the value of students.txt. Now your computer will understand that wherever I might want to make use of students.txt, rather than writing the whole form, like you can write it this way too, that if I want to do read or not read open file, and I might want to do something like open file, at this point I can just do open file my file, which sort of tells the computer that, bro, whatever the value is in my file, you need to open that up, which is sort of same as this file, right? Because we specified, we initialized that data up here. But if you also want to do it this way, that you write the whole string inside it, but you can also do that, but then you need to add the quotation marks too. So you should be aware that this is also 100% perfectly valid. But now writing this fully everywhere for opening file, closing files and all that stuff, it's going to be very challenging. So, or maybe even wasting time. So it's generally better that you just create a variable which stores the name of your file, you assign it to it at the start, and wherever you might want to open and close the file, you can just call the function with the variable's name, which is going to be easier. Now the good point is that first and foremost, you need to tell the computer that, okay, bro, I need to open my file. So how will you be opening my file? So for opening file, you need to first of all maybe open file. Now this open file and close file, iske andar ek aur cheez bhi hum kar sakte hain. Rather than it being open file, we're going to do one other thing. We're going to change this open file logic. Perhaps wo jo hai, you will be required to use it the other way alongside the loop, right? So for that, at your level, it's going to be the syntax for that is that you're going to write the keyword open and you will be specifying the name of the file. Okay, file. And then you need to specify the specific format for why you might be opening. So open my file for what purpose? For read/write. So abhi iske upar question karte hain, you're going to understand it pretty well. So now let's say I want to open my file. So one way is that I do this open file wali logic, but that sort of does not tell the computer that, okay, do I want to open it for reading or do I want to open it for writing? And also it does not sort of implement this logic where you were asking this question that, sir, how will the computer get to know that I need to go to the next line, the next line, next line, next line, next line, next line. So for that, we're going to be implementing opening file wali logic, but using a for statement. Now, what's a for statement? It's sort of similar to the for loop, right? So we will be implementing this logic. How does this go? It basically goes in a very, very easy way. We're going to first of all write open, then you need to specify what do you want to open. I want to open my file, right? So you would be like, open my file. But then at this point, you need to tell the computer that you want to open it for the purpose of reading, or do you want to open it for the purpose of writing? So for at this point, we are sort of opening the file for the purpose of reading it, right? So I'll be like, okay, open my file for the purpose of read. So the computer will understand that now you're trying to open this file which has the name of my file as a variable, which has the data student.txt. So now your computer will go to this file, it's going to open it up. But you will be only allowed to do the functions which read can do, which means that you can only read the data. If you try to do something like write line up here or something like write file, that's going to be invalid. Why? Because you did not open it for the purpose of writing. You're only doing it for read. So if I want to open it for read, this means I can now make use of read file function. How will I be doing it? Very easy. I'll be like, okay, now I've opened the file. At this point, my computer gives me, sir, why are we supposed to declare a variable that there's already a file name? I'm coming to that point. Heather, the second variable which I'm creating, this sentence, are you talking about that? Or are you trying to say why are we supposed to declare a variable that's there's already a file name? So you're sort of saying that we sort of have the file name, so why are we sort of creating a separate variable for that? That's your question, right? Okay, so the thing is that if I do it this way, open my file for read, is this sort of easier? Or if I do something like, rather than this being my file, let me copy this thingy. I was just sort of explaining the same logic to you all beforehand. Just give me a minute. Isko agar main copy karu, you're gonna see that I can either do it this way, or then the second way would be if I might implement something like writing the name of the file. Open students dot txt for read. So now if let's say at one point this might be enough, but what if I also want to now close that file, maybe reopen it again, reclose it? Because in a question there can be possibility to do it again and again, again and again, again and again. So writing the name of the file will be 100% valid. It's not necessary to create this variable of my file to store the name, but if you do it, it's going to be easier for you to open and close file, because open my file, close my file, open this, open that, read file, write file, all that stuff. It's sort of very, very easier for us to implement the logic rather than sort of writing the whole text name. So for that reason, we created this variable my file, जिसके अंदर we are assigning the value beforehand. Sir, अगर variable ना भी हो तो code सही तो हो? Yes, बिल्कुल. If you do it even this way, open student.txt for read, you're still going to be perfectly fine. But do know you are required to declare the second sentence wala variable. Why do we need that sentence variable? Because definitely if I want to read the data from it, if I let's say want to read this Anas name, where will this Anas name be stored? We need to create a variable that stores this name, right? So for that reason, this name is basically then going to be stored in this sentence variable, which we have sort of implementing. So how will this go? I'll be like, okay, open my file for read, and now I want to read the file. So what I will be doing it, I'll be just writing the function command, which I discussed with you all above. I would be like, okay, read file. And where within the world of read file do I want to store my data? Okay, a second, let it just get back to it. Read file, comma, and where do I want to store the data which it reads? We're going to store it in the sentence variable. So I'll be like, okay, bro, go to the computer, because we sort of implemented a logic which goes in a way using a for statement. It is similar to implementing the same for loop logic. For loop mein kya hota hai? You start from the very first line, and then when I do next statement, we sort of go to the next line, right? We go to the next line. So how does this work? It goes for your file, and then it outputs the text line, and then you sort of are required to go again. Now this thingy where it goes again and again, again and again, again and again, that is something which is implemented more in AS level. At your level, you won't be required to do that much, but you should be aware that when you open my file for read, it's just going to read one line and it's going to print it for you. And then if you want to keep on repeating this, for that the logic which you have, that is not relevant to you all at your level. I'm going to open the syllabus for you after this. उससे भी हम confirm करेंगे कि क्या-क्या चीजें हमने करनी है और क्या-क्या चीजें नहीं करनी, because that is the point where if you want to implement it again and again, again and again, again and again, then you will be making use of another function which is something not discussed at your course level. So why are we even tiring ourselves to do that? So you should be just aware of this fact that I'm going to do open my file for read. I'm going to read the file. I'm going to store the value in the sentence variable. And now I would be like, okay, this sentence now apparently has the name inside it. So if I want to print this name, I can directly do what? I can just write output followed by the sentence output followed by the variable name, which is sentence. And what does this do? It basically takes the value which is within this sentence variable. Where does the value come into sentence? It comes through the file which we opened and which we read through this function. So we opened up a file, we read that using this function, the value which we got, we stored that in the sentence variable, and we are now printing that sentence. And boom, now onto my screen, I can see the name, whatever it is, maybe it's Mars, right? But now at the end, if you see, I have successfully opened a specific file and I've sort of read the data inside it. But now at the end, I'm always required to close it, right? So if I have to close it, I'm just making use of the close file function, just the way I said. I would be like, okay, close file followed by my file. And boom, you are good to go. You have sort of closed the file too. So close file, my file, and it tells the computer that I've successfully closed the file, and now I'm good to go. Now let's say I might want to implement a logic where I does the value come randomly in the variable sentence? No, 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 no. It does not come randomly. Whatever the value at the top of the page is, it's gonna be like that. So if you do something like a page like this which has Mars inside it at the top, then let's say Ramin. So first time you read this statement of read file, what it does is it takes this Mars and grabs this Mars up here. Then afterwards you again do something like read file. The second time you do read file, the second time it's going to grab the second name to it. But now that logic of where you might have multiple names being printed and multiple values being read, that is, if I'm not wrong, discussed in your O-level syllabus. I'm going to open the syllabus in front of you to see wo hai ya nahi hai, because it's not there as per my knowledge, but we're still going to reconfirm it. That logic is something which we need to do in AS level. So abhi hum syllabus kholenge, we're going to confirm it from there too, but that is everything you should be aware. You should be able to open a file, and within that file you should just be able to grab one statement from it. So it will have the value which is the top. But what if we want to store a middle name or last name? Then what will we do? If you want to store a middle name, if you want to store something inside a file, this code only works for reading. This is sort of only when you want to take some input from a file. Let's say I want to take some data outside the file, so I'm going to use this code because it reads it. If I want to store data inside it, then for that I will be writing a sort of a different code. So like if the second question comes up to let's say write a program that write a program that writes data into a program, or maybe data into a file, perhaps. Write a program that writes data into a file. So how will I be doing it? Just like before, I'm going to first of all be asking the user to maybe what do we call it, give us some sort of data. The user will be entering a text, and I'm going to be writing the text in that. So remember, when I say that you need to write file, this means that write file means that you have something like an empty file. So when I do write file, it creates an empty file. And now I need to basically take input from the user, and that input is then basically stored in that file. That is the logic when I say that you need to write a file. I mean, instead of top values, what if we want any other value which is not at the top? Now, Sanan, that specific type of question is not relevant to you at your level. I'm going to still confirm it from the syllabus. Agar hua to wo hum discuss karenge, but I guess it's not something which you should be aware of. If you want to find some middle value and something like that, that question is something that will be tested in your AS level because it includes one extra function. But let me just confirm it from the syllabus. If it is, we can do those questions too, but if I'm not wrong, it's not discussed at your level. So at your level, the maximum question which might be given to you is that, let's say you have a specific file which might only have values in one sentence. So it might have Mars, it might have Musa, it might have, let's say, Ramin, and now I might want to print all of this in one line. So by doing read file, it's going to grab all of this, it's going to print all that into sentence, and I can basically output the sentence. And just like that, let's say I want to put some name up here. Let's say I want to put Mars up here. How will I be doing it? So just like before, I need to declare two things. I will be declaring a variable with the name of my file, which will be storing my file name. So it's going to be string. And then definitely I'll be also creating another variable which will be storing what sentence do you want to basically put into the program. So if I, let's say, want to put a sentence like text line, isko de dete na. Text line, what text line does is that it is the specific sort of sentence or the statement or the line value which you want to put into this empty file. How will you be doing it? Pretty straightforward. I'll be like, okay, you need to open up this empty file which has the name of my file, and you assign this variable with the value of, let's say, what's the name of the file? Maybe empty.txt. Empty and dot, just a minute, ulta ho gaya. Let me remove this. Empty.txt. It's going to open that file, and now I want to open it for the purpose of writing it, right? So you need to do something like open my file for write purpose. I want to write it. So I'll be like, okay, open my file for the purpose of writing. And now if I want to write some line, definitely I need to take input for it there. What do you want to put up here, right? So I'll be like, okay, output, ask the user to enter a statement. Enter a statement. And now the user is going to be giving me a value which I need to then put up there. So what value will I be putting up here? The same value which I need to put next to the write file command. So this variable in this case is what? It's basically this text line. So I'll be taking an input for the text line. I'll be like, bro, whatever your text line is, you give me that input. I'm going to take that from the user. And once I take that input from the user, I'm going to store that within my command, within my file. So how will I be doing this? Now I took this and I'll be like write file, comma, text line. And it is automatically then going to ensure that if this input was of Mars and you execute this command, it's going to print Mars up here. And then definitely once I'm done with this, I will be required to close my file. So I'll be like, okay, close file, my file. And these are the basic two commands you should be aware of. Now, till now, I haven't seen a lot of questions on this, especially in terms of the pseudocode implementation. Sir, I just checked and I think line number is involved as with example file and this example use the two file declare file A, file B, read file A, line of text, write file B, line of text, close file. Okay, uske upar aate. Is this from the syllabus? Is this from the syllabus or where? Now this same example which Hassan, okay, बस अभी syllabus ही खोलते हैं तो उसके अंदर वो कर लेंगे. These are the general two commands you should be aware of. Now let me open up the syllabus. I am going to check it alongside you to see कि इसके अंदर कितना है और कितना नहीं है. So if I open up the syllabus for you guys, just give me a minute. Let the syllabus get loaded up and present the syllabus. So if you see, this is our syllabus, right? So in this, if I go to this topic, which is part of chapter number 8, chapter number 8, arrays and file ending, you should be basically, see up here, understand the purpose of storing data in a file, be used by program, which we just saw that, okay, it's sort of helping us along. Open, close and use a file, including read and write single items of data. Read and write a line of text. So you are not required to sort of implement a model that requires multiple lines. Does it anywhere says that you need to be aware of multiple lines? No, right now, if I open up the A-level syllabus for you, because teachers, they usually do teach these advanced comments where they are like, okay, nee, you should be aware of this. You should be aware of how you need to read multiple lines and all that stuff. So bachche pareshan ho jate hain, sir, what is end of file? What is this? What is that? But if you look up here, no. This single line of text would just mean that your file is going to be having one line. So I say that there is this file which only has my name, Maz Munir. So this is one line. This is one line. So if I should be just able to read this one line, which is pretty much evident, I'm going to be reading it. So I'm going to write the keyword read file. And alongside read file, I'm going to write the variable where I might want to store it, saying maybe name. So my name now stores the value of Maz Munir, but within what? Within the quotation marks. So yeah, it now stores this. Just like that, I want to write something. So the code which I just wrote, it wrote a single line of text. Then it also says that you should be reading and writing single items of data. So which means that there is going to be a single item which you would be required to read and write. So now let me find this from the, what do we call it, A-level concept to further sort of explain this. Let me see yahan pe kahin pe hoga, so that if anybody of you still have this one query in their mind, it should be sort of solved, so that if you're discussing this in your schools or somewhere, yeah, so look up here. This is now from your A-level syllabus. Again, this is Cambridge AS level syllabus. AS level syllabus. This is files. Look up here. Candidates should be able to show understanding of why files are needed, same as O-levels. Same as O-level and IGCSE. And the next statement says, write pseudocode to handle text file that consist of one or more lines. So you sort of clearly see that the syllabus, just the way wherever I say that you people, these teachers are teaching you something which are not in the course, and then they're like, nahi yaar, hame pata nahi hai. There is no assurity. What if Cambridge examiners give a question like that? So bro, if the Cambridge examiner was supposed to give you a question which had more than one or more lines, they would have mentioned something like this, where they clearly mention that, bro, you need to write pseudocode that to handle text file that consists of one or more lines. This is the keyword, more lines. So because we don't have the case of one or more lines, our syllabus clearly mentions that you are required to only deal with what? Read and write a line of text, or read and write a single line of data, which means that at your level, you're not required to read multiple lines. So for that reason, I will not be even sharing the pseudocode for that. Why do you want to go into something which is not relevant to you all? So just know that at your point, this is the exact sort of code which you should be aware of. You should be understanding how you declare a file which can basically create a code which can basically read one line from it, how you make use of read file and store the value in a sentence. And just like if you want to write something, you open that file for writing purpose, you take an input, and then you basically write the command of write file and text line. And at the start, you always open the file this syntax using this way, open this way, and you always close it this way. Now, when you have multiple lines, then in that case, you might be doing that open file logic, which I was sort of doing first. But at your level, it's not necessary to ye tarika nahi use karna where you do it this way. You need to follow this logic. At your AS level, inshallah, you're going to study it in a bit more advanced level. And it's really very easy. Even if I want to implement that logic with you all, it's not difficult at all. And aap log ke liye 10-15 minute ki baat hai, you're going to understand it. But why should you be wasting your precious time on something that's not even related to you? Now, I hope that you all are confident with this, because now I have proved it to you using your syllabus that it's not required. Say it. Is this clear now? In the chart box. And at the same time, I can even paste this in the syllabus image in the notes, so that if anybody else is viewing the notes later on, they can also understand that, bro, you don't need to learn how to implement it for multiple lines from the syllabus. From syllabus. And that basically marks the end of our discussion over read and write function. But ab isi tarah ka question can come up that, let's say you want to write the marks of one student, of, let's say you might have to calculate the marks of a specific student. You might want to store those marks. So you might do like, okay, there are marks and you want to store that marks in a specific position. How will you be doing that? You'd be like, okay, let me take an input for marks. So like the question is, take an input for marks, and store it in a file, in an empty file. Remember, one important point is that whenever we make use of write command, this write command only works for empty files. There is one other command too, which is known as append. Again, not discussed at your level. It is an A level concept, so we won't be discussing this. But you should be aware that whenever I say write file, it works for empty file. And if there is no empty file, it sort of creates an empty file. So if I do something like write file, it automatically creates an empty file if it does not exist. You should be aware of these two concepts. So if you have something like a file which already has data inside it, let's say I have this file, I might want to add something up here. And if you do write file, it's going to abolish all this and it's going to write something at the top. So it's going to replace whatever it is. So it's always going to create an empty file. Ye zehen mein rakhna. Now the one where it adds something at the end, that is something which we will be sort of doing once we get to AS level, inshallah. So no need to cook your brain with that concept at this point. But just for now, be familiar with these concepts, like take an input for marks and store it in an empty file with the name final grade. So how will I be doing it? Final grade.txt. So just like that before, let's assume we don't need to declare it this time. So I'll be directly implementing it that I have my file, that my file is being assigned the value of, let's say, final grade.txt, final grade.txt. And now I might want to open it up because I want to store something inside it, right? So I'm going to open my file for what purpose? Because I want to store data inside it. This means that my purpose for opening it is going to be what? It's going to be read. Is it going to be read, by the way, everyone in the chat box? Is it going to be read? If I want to open my file, will the purpose be read or will it be write? Okay, you are saying no. Why is the answer for this no? Why should I, like, what's wrong with this statement? I want to, everyone, Shaba in the chat box, everybody. Why is this statement wrong? Open my file for read. Jaldi, jaldi, jaldi batao. We are storing marks. Okay, Mariam, so if you are storing marks, so what? So what should be the difference up here? You're correct. So if you are storing marks, so what? Sahi ja rahe ho? the file is empty, no, it would be right, bilkul perfectly. Because we are sort of writing something, we are storing something, right? We are storing something. So when we are sort of storing something, so storing ka to ye matlab hai that I'm writing something to it, I'm copying something to it, I'm sort of putting some data inside it. So whenever I want to put some data inside a file, what will be the function? It's going to be write. So for that reason, I won't be writing read. Read kab hoga? Read will be that, let's say I have a file which has data inside it and I want to read the data from it, or maybe I want to take the data from it. How would we read from something which is empty? No. If a question comes up where you have to read it, it won't be an empty file. Don't worry. Say, so if there is an empty file, it will be giving you the question where you might be most probably putting data inside it. So like in this case, it's asking us to store a data. So this means you are writing data inside it. But if let's say a question comes up to now read from it, so a file which you're going to read from, it's not going to be empty one. Otherwise, if it's empty, then the text which will be outputted, that will also be empty. There will be nothing printed apparently. समझ गए? Sir, ये question errors वाले में आ सकता है. As of now, there has been no such question tested, at least from what I have seen. But to be very honest, you cannot say anything about examiner. It's up to them. It's in the syllabus and it can come and it cannot come too. So this topic, just the way I mentioned earlier, it's pretty rarely tested. It's not tested a lot, even though it was introduced in 2023. So you should just be aware of the general concepts and let's see kya banta hai. But that's the maximum you would be asked to do. So right, you're going to open the file for write, and now I let's say want to ask for the marks. So I'll be like input the marks of the students, input marks, and I'm going to put these marks into this text file by writing the command write file, and then alongside that a comma and then marks, that you write the marks value into this file. And then definitely once I'm done with it, I would be doing what? I would be like, bro, let me close this file. So I would be like close file. And what file you want to close? Why am I specifying this inside this? Because a question might come up that you have two files. Maybe from one file you're writing data, from the other file you're reading data. So like what if I say that another example question, maybe this is a bit advanced one, and I hope so that if you read this after this, isme aapko koi masla nahi hona chahiye. This is sort of an advanced level question. Read, ya balki is tarah kar dete hain, you are creating a program that copies data, from one file, from yahan tak hi hai, my bad, oh bhai remove ho ja, from one file to another, write the pseudocode that takes data from file A to file B, data from file A to file B. So what are we trying to do? We have some data in file A. So we have some data in file A. Let's say it's some name or something, right? There's some data inside it. And then I have some file B, which is sort of empty. Okay, this has nothing inside it. What I want you to do is, yahan pe likh bhi dete ho, to another that is empty. What I need you to do is, I'm going to be writing a program in this case where I will be grabbing this data from file A, and then I want to somehow take this data to some external point, maybe some variable, and then I want to take this value from this variable. I'm going to write it into file B so that the same file comes up here too. Sort of I copied it. So what's going to be the logic for this? Exactly, we will open file A, we're going to read from that file A. Then we will open file B, then we are going to write it in file B. But Sanan, you made the same mistake which I was sort of going to make. You forget that you need to also close the files. You close the files, bro. You always are required to close the files. So you're losing one easy marks. So how will I be writing the code for this? Very much easy peasy. What? Just the way you said. I have a file name A. So let's say that I have file 1. Okay, so let's create a variable with the name of declare. Let's do it properly. Okay, so declare file 1. And I give it the name of, let's say, string, data type of string. And definitely I need to store it in the other one too, declare file 2. The file 2 is going to be again having the same data type of string. Then definitely I need to store this value somewhere, right? So I might declare a variable with the name of value in this case. Declare value. And this value variable is going to be storing the data which is inside file A. So this is also going to be of the data type string. Now I need to first of all open the file A. I need to grab this data which is within file A, and I need to put it into this variable which I created with the name of value. So how do I grab something from a file? It's similar to doing this. Idhar gaya? Read wala function. No, this. So how do I read it? I'm going to implement this logic. So I would be like, okay, let me open this up. So I would be like, open. Which file do I want to open? Do I want to open, perhaps even before that, I did not assign what's the value of file 1 and what's the value of file 2. So ye bhulna nahi. You need to first of all assign the value. So file 1 is what? File 1 is basically going to be having the data file A. So file A.txt. File A.txt, or whatever the name of the file is in your exam, right? But this is just an example file. So file B will be file B.txt. File B.txt. Now I need to open this file. So how will I be opening it? Just like before, easy peasy. I'm going to be making use of the open point, open keyword. Open which file do I want to open? I want to open this file because this stores the data. This stores the data. Whereas the beneath one, this file B, this is the file which needs to have the data. So data copied into this. Data copied into this. So I need to copy the data into the second file. So I'll be like, okay, open file 1 for read, because I want to grab the data from here. I want to read it. So I'll be like, okay, bro, open this file, and whatever the data is in this, I need to take that data and store it in the value variable. So I'll be like, read file. And when you read it, the whatever data is inside that file, you put that data into the variable with the name of value. And now I'll be like, okay, I'm done with this. I have the data inside the value variable. So I would be closing the file. The data does not go anywhere because it's stored in the variable value. So I'm like, okay, close file, file 1. Now I want to implement a logic where I take the value which is in the value variable and I put it into my file B. So I'll be like, okay, let me reopen file 2 now. Perhaps let me open file 2. So I'll be like, okay, open followed by file 2 for what? For write. So you open up file number 2 for the purpose of write, and this time you're going to be making use of the command write file. And what value do you want to basically put into it? You want to put the value which we counted or basically found out in this first part where I was reading the file. I stored that data inside my value variable. So I want to take that value variable. I'm going to store this up here, right? So I'll be like, okay, now you have opened it up. You need to write file. What do you want to write? This value variable, whatever is the data inside this value. And once done with this, it is basically going to, what happens is that the first part basically takes this data and it stores that data up here. So you have the data up here. Whereas the second part opens file B and it basically takes this data and you sort of write it up here. So eventually, if you look up at the model, the same data which you had up here, you have sort of copied the data to the other file. And that is sort of also the logic which generally is being implemented. But then once I'm done with it, I will be like, okay, close file. But now, which file do I want to close? I want to close file number 2. So for that reason, it's really important that you have close file followed by the exact name of the file. And once we are done with this, let's say I might want to output copying done. Output copying done. That, in my opinion, could be a question that will be sort of maximum difficulty. Yeah, sort of, even if a question comes up with even greater difficulty, it will be sort of implementing this exact logic. Exactly. It's not difficult. Now, the advanced sort of thingies are something which is being done when you have multiple lines. वो AS level का content है. At your level, you would have definitely seen. It's not that much. Question. Okay. Yellow. I guess it's visible now, right? So at your level, it's not that difficult. The question mostly will be testing this much concept. And initially, in our past paper session, we have like sort of a lot of papers from 2023 onwards. So if the examiner wanted to test this concept, like very importantly, it's really important कि वो फिर इसके ऊपर question भी देता. If they are not giving a question that much, this means that they don't have a lot to test because it's just a single line. So single line के तो इस तरह easy commands होंगे, easy pseudocodes होंगे. So it's not going to be very difficult. So is this mandatory to create a separate variable to save the data and then move to file B? Yes, it is mandatory. directly. Why? Because definitely if you open up this first file, you need to first of all store this data somewhere, because when you close that file, whatever the data is, you don't have access to it, right? So what we do is that I, let's say, have some data up here. If I don't copy the data to some temporarily variable which I've created externally, if I execute this close file command, this file which I had opened, bro, it has vanished. So how can I somehow access the data again to store it up there? So what I do is I'm like, okay, when I open it up at the first place, I'm going to grab this data, I'm going to put it into a separate value variable, and then later on the empty file, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to close this, which means this is going to go away. But because I created a variable, this is going to be there in my memory. So now I'm going to take this value variable, I'm going to put and this inside my file which was empty, using what command? Using the write command. And that is how you make use of file handling in your questions. Is this clear, Anas and everybody else? Do you understand this whole thing? Sir, इससे पहले वाला कोड भी थोड़ा दिखा दे. बिल्कुल दिखाता हूँ. Don't worry. आप लोग easily ये कर लेना. And also I'm going to just upload the, what do we call it, relevant notes for this. Abhi kar leta hu. Don't worry. So they will be available in like 10-15 minutes. So if you just want to copy it from there, that also works. Say, so everybody in the chat box, is this clear? Everyone in the classroom right now. If it's not clear or if there are any questions, so push lo. Otherwise, we are done with the whole most important part, which apparently means that congratulations, we are sort of done with the entire chapter number 8. There is just one small chunk left, which I want to discuss with you, that is sort of similar to firstly, creating a maintainable program followed by trace tables, which means that inshallah we're going to do that tomorrow. And then Thursday wala din to, just the way I said, will be for the practice session, and from Friday onwards we will be jumping into chapter number 9. Alongside that, for all of you who might have had this one question in their mind, sir, 15 marker kab hoga, sir, when are we going to do more practice? So don't worry at all. If you just open up your classroom, all these practice sessions which we are conducting, the recordings for those have been uploaded on your classroom portal. So you don't need to worry at all. You can just open up your portal. Let me share the screen. So you see up here, if you go there, I have uploaded the one which we conducted that day on Saturday. So yeah, we did a few questions up here, and then this was the one which we conducted yesterday 11:30. If you haven't watched it, if you couldn't attend it, no problem at all. Koi masle ki baat nahi. But do ensure that you please watch this recording. This has to be really important. Just have a look at it. It's like 1 hour 45 minutes video, and in the first 15 minutes we have been discussing important questions. Now maybe you know those scenarios, maybe you know those thingies, but what if you don't know? Sometimes students do ask pretty good questions. So just listen to those so that you get those common tips, those tricks as to how to ace them. And then just watch this, because in this we sort of implemented multiple questions. We saw how to solve them, how to deal with arrays, how to deal with substrings. There were a few really good questions which you would love to have a look at to understand how it's being implemented. So you see, we have done multiple questions, and it's sort of that we won't be ending this up here on the weekends. And whenever I get some extra time just like this, I will be conducting extra classes which will be open and free for everybody. You all can sort of join in, and also if you want to share it with your friends and all, you can also do that. So how will you be doing it? So it's sort of similar that you just need to be implementing that model, and aapka sara ka sara good scene se ho jayega. That is everything for today. And if you have any questions, you can share those, you can ask those. Otherwise, see you guys inshallah tomorrow. The recording will be available. And take care everybody. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.